Yeah, that's better.
We're live. Hey, welcome to our program tonight on Globespan 24/7 here in New York. This winter is not going away. It's bitter cold today. I don't know what's going on with the temperature, but we want to welcome you from New York and from Guyana as we bring to you our Monday night program. We want to thank Nohar Singh for making this platform available, and of course, to Devin Bisu, our technical specialist. To your audience out there, we want to thank you for joining us. And tonight will be a great night because we have two of Guyana's greatest sons with us. We know we have a lot of information, a lot of topic to cover, and who else can answer them except two of Guyana's, as I said, great sons. So tonight I want to welcome to you Mr. Christopher Ram, Senior Counsel, or Mr. Christopher Ram, Attorney at Law and Chartered Accountant. Mr. Ram, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And of course, Mr. Sanjeev Datadin, another Attorney of Law, also Chairman of the Airport Authority and some other boards as well. Mr. Datadin, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
All right. And of course, my co-host, Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome to you, Mr. Christopher Ram, and the Honorable Mr. Sanjeev Datadin.
Thank you. And gentlemen, tonight, and to our audience, tonight we are dealing with some important topic, which is transparency, accountability, good governance, and the controversial oil contract. Four very important areas that affect the lives, I believe, of all Guyanese. So let's start with Mr. Ram. Mr. Ram, transparency. How transparent has been our government since they took office about 18 months ago?
Well, as far as the agreement is concerned, the agreement has been out there long before the government took office. So there's no question of a transparency in relation to the agreement.
What agreement are you talking about?
The petroleum exploration and production, the petroleum agreement of 2016 signed by the APNU AFC coalition.
No, I'm talking not only that, I'm talking about general transparency of the government over the last 18 months.
Well, general transparency of the government in relation to the petroleum operations.
And governance and everything else.
I think
in your view,
you'd have to say it's mixed. Lots of things are happening we don't necessarily know. Some of them you can say the government is not mandatorily required to do some things. You have the Access to Information Act, which should assist in transparency and information. That is far from functioning satisfactorily. So I would have to say it's a mixed bag when it comes to transparency.
So if you were to give the government a grade, what will that grade be?
Probably half and half.
Okay. Mr. Datadin, you're a member of parliament for the ruling party, and you've been with the PP for many years. In your view, how transparent has been the government for the past 18 months?
Charles, you hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Yeah, we're hearing you.
Hello. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Charles, I think they've been very transparent. They have opened up what they're doing. They have made clear what must happen. They have announced where necessary what are the plans. They have made it clear that there is no special treatment. They're meeting everyone that wishes to meet. It's been repeatedly said over and over that if you would like to meet, then you could make an appointment. At the recent oil and gas, the conference that was held in Guyana, you could have gone and written down best boot if you want ministers or those in government because you wanted information or you had a plan. It could have been done. There was no issue about that. There was no that was something that was very open. The legislation that has been passed mandates that certain things happen very openly too. So we couldn't quarrel.
And Mr. Yeah, and Mr. Ram, what Mr. Datadin just said there, in fairness to the government, we met Minister Prasad here last week, and she was very clear. She said her door is open. People go into her to have discussion, and she asked them some simple question. Can you put together a plan in writing to us so that we can move forward? They never returned with a plan. So how can we say the government is not transparent when they ask us to get things done, we don't get it done?
Sir, transparency does not refer to what the people do. It refers to what the government does. And let's get serious. We have major projects. And I am not for or against these projects. I am waiting for a proper technical analysis and the disclosure. If Mr. Datadin could provide me with a copy, or Minister Prasad could provide me with a copy of the Amila Falls contract and the study that has gone into it, I would welcome that. If I could be provided with a copy of the study and the analysis that has gone into the gas to shore project, I would welcome that. If I could be provided with all these statements under this 2016 agreement, I would welcome that. It is not to ask people to bring this or bring that. Transparency is who has the information should disclose it. I accept that Minister Prasad is open. I don't have any reason to deny that she had made a statement. I don't know who she made the statement of. Was it a realistic proposition? Why did she meet? What were who requested the meeting and all of these things?
And that's a good,
so,
yeah.
And you know, let me tell you something. The most important thing for me when it comes to the elections, that election expenses report. Mr. Datadin might help us to say where those returns are. That's transparency.
Yeah,
and the law and Sanjeev, before you answer that, the law does require that political parties submit their income and expenses to the Elections Commission. The only party I'm told submitted it was the ANOG. Why is the PEP submitted their report to the Elections Commission?
Well, firstly, that law is done all the time. This is the first time that ANOG has done it. We have an Elections Commission, and if there is no compliance, and if they would like compliance, then they should start to say that this is something that they want to have done. I'm not saying, and don't misinterpret what I say, I'm not saying that because they have not requested it, you should not do it. But they are that need to change, obviously. And if it is that this is now active, then it has done. There's no, that in itself has nothing to do with transparency. Mr. Ram wants to know about Amalia, wants to know where the studies are. These are the strange things that we keep getting from persons who say they are civil.
I'm not hearing very well. Sanjeev, can you speak up? Because I'm straining to hear.
All right, Mr. Ram, there have been many things that have been asked never to speak up. It's always I'm too loud. But am I heard? Am I being heard?
You're gone again.
Let me see. You hear me loud and clear?
I'm hearing you now. Yes.
All right. So we're back to the position of this. Amelia Falls, for those who were interested, could have obtained the reports that they have, the government has, And all of the information that has been in existence of Amelia Falls, including all the reports, for every bidder, there was a fee, and for everybody who bid, this was available. Information that was put into the public domain, because it was not the sort of information that it was felt should be there. But if you were a bidder, you got the information so that you can make a bid. The same was true at the Harbour Bridge. The same was true with the gas to shore. In the gas to shore project, it's slightly different because that's being negotiated and worked out. Now, everyone believes that their view is the right view and that what they want is what they want. How could that be practical? You want to share information about surveys that are done, that about studies are done. To what end? You have a right to this day. There is a misconception that the elected government must get the approval of everybody for every project. How could that be practical? It's like this nonsensical argument about Article 13, that people must be consulted. As a result, every decision taken by the government must be somehow approved by civil society. What do you think the election was? The election was consulting the population. Read the Constitution in its entirety. You can't be consulted about every decision. Do you want everybody to sit in cabinet every once a week so that every decision could be made? You cannot take things to this preposterous level. I understand if you say that you have a view as to whether a project is viable or not, but it's not viable on what strength. The government of the day is elected to make decisions. The government, the elected officials are the only people answerable to the population. Those who sit in civil society elsewhere, they have the luxury to keep pontificating about all things rather than govern a country. And governing a country means you make decisions. You pay for your ballot. That's what your manifesto and mandate comes from. These are things that you are entitled when you are in government. You're entitled to make the decisions as to relevance. Now, anybody who looks at the gas to shore project knows that what it will do is reduce our electricity bills. That's a benefit to the whole country. In its development stage, that will provide employment too. You can't look at it singular thing as to what it only costs to build, because we spend 10% of the cost every year to buy fuel. 10% with generators that have no prospect of taking us into the future. We've got to be able to do something to change the equation. So we can't go around in circles. We can't go around in circles and nitpick at things to say, well, I want this and I want that. If you were bidding on Amelia Falls, Mr. Ram, you, upon informing them, there was a registration process. You provided an email, you did a registration, access to a data room. When you got access to a data room, all of the report, the surveys, all of the possible financials and the prospects would have been available to you. I don't understand why you think that that should be public knowledge. Is it public knowledge for what? For every decide to formulate the
Okay, all right,
concept.
Sanjeev.
How is that possible?
You've made a statement. Before Mr. Ram responds and Dr. Rose comes in, I think what I've learned over the years, and maybe I'm wrong too, Sanjeev, is that politicians knows everything. And I think that's the big problem, that when you get elected to government, the politicians believe they know everything, and you're not going to listen to nobody else except what the politicians want to do. And I think what Chris is saying is that you made a good point there, that if you want information, you got to go bid for the document. But not everyone wants to be a project provider. So how do they get access to the information to do analytical work? And Chris is an accountant, Chris is an attorney like you. He's more analytical than going to do a project. And I think the government, in fairness, in my view and the view of many others, is that the more input there is, the better decision hopefully they will make. You don't have to listen to every opinion out there, but having that opinion on your side, I think that lends a lot of transparency. Don't you think?
I agree with you, but you have to understand that in large projects like this, reports and data have value. And if you made it public information, then the value of it is diminished. So while what you receive is summarized versions of the values and some of the reports and information like that, those who are participating, they don't want the information to be everywhere. So how do you balance the two? You could.
But Sanjeev, with the experience we have in Guyana with the PPP, don't forget, it was the PPP who built the Skeldon estate, hoping that the price of sugar, the cost of production will go down dramatically. We spent $200 million for something that is not producing a dime of sugar. So it's not that the PPP don't know what they want to do. Of course they do. They're elected. They're the government. But I'm saying with the record that we have, wouldn't some additional input from others help in the process to determine the best strategy out there? Maybe the gas to shore pipeline is a great project. Well, suppose a big white elephant again we went into. What happens then?
Well, here's what, Charles. Time will answer both of those questions. What happens in the future? But who are you recommending or who are you suggesting on the information of gas to shore? Are you suggesting that people with the necessary expertise do so? Or are you suggesting the average citizen should have it? Those are economic and technical decisions, not democratic. I don't mean to be rude, but most of us are not qualified to advise on it because we don't know enough. We don't have the skills or the knowledge to be of any use except what we perceive to be logic and reality. So I understand that there are some things where democracy will prevail and democratic ideas will prevail. But that prevails all the time. But you're talking about a specific, very technical project. I mean, I have a little bit of experience. I don't profess to be an expert. But I have heard from the ridiculous to the sublime about issues with the gas to shore project. And people are saying things that make absolutely no sense. But it's what they believe is the whole issue.
And your point is taken. Okay. We'll get into the gas to shore.
Here's what I will say, Charles. Here's what I will say. Major projects like the Amalia Falls project, the gas to shore project, I agree that you got to have enough information to make a good decision. And I also agree that those decisions should fall to the people who, their decision, they must pay for it. If they're right or if they're wrong, the people must have an opportunity to punish them or reward them for it.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Rose, sorry I got you waiting so long.
No, is Mr. Christopher Ram wants to respond?
No, you go on.
Okay.
You go on. I mean, it's pointless speaking with someone who keep. The new word for Sanjeev is that everybody talks nonsense. Carl Greenwich talks nonsense. Christopher Ram talks. Somebody, as Charles said, the politicians have the monopoly on wisdom. The point is this. Don't tell me about a room 10 years ago. We're talking about the current project. And let me say, Mr. Moderators, there are some people who raise legitimate questions about the Amalia Falls project on the site, a global, and its prohibitive cost. Do you know that the cost now, 10 years later, is a few $100 million less? In other words, people do have understanding. People do know. Sanjeev Datadin thinks everybody is an ignoramus and they talk nonsense. And that's his right to believe that. But people,
I don't think
and
anybody
you know,
is an
I come back to
ignoramus.
Article 13.
I didn't say anybody
That
is an
people must have
ignoramus.
a say in decision making. And Sanjeev probably knows, I've made inquiries. These things, you hear about electricity price can be half. But when you look at the details, it says over the life of the project, over the life of a 20-year project. Isn't it fair, Sanjeev, that we know the structure, for example, like the Berbice Bridge? Yes, the price is going to come down eventually, or ought to have come down eventually. But the recovery period, and this is where we can make, people like Charles Sugrim can make a contribution. Look, the recovery structure is inadequate, that it requires too much front-end loadings, because every project, every financial project, you know, one of the tests you have is the payback period. Everybody would like to see a project paid back as early as possible for a number of reasons. One, the risk. Two, the cost of capital. And you've got risk, financial, technical, and all of those things. So obviously, people want to get back their money as early as possible. Now, how is it structured? And Sanjeev can tell us, because he knows. With the project, it says we will get back, the price will be 7.7 cents or something like that over the 20-year period. What's the price likely to be in the first 3 years? And what is it likely to be in the last 3 years? That kind of information would be useful.
Mr. If you had to traverse to Berbice frequently, then you would know that the price or the value of the bridge is not only what the government. The value of the bridge.
I wasn't talking about the bridge. I was talking about the
You
project.
were talking about the bridge too. And if you don't understand that governments must make decisions that have social impact, and the value of the bridge is to be able to traverse, to go to Berbice and come back in half a day, 1 day, then you have not had to sit and wait on that ferry for days. All right? And I'm telling you that the value of the bridge is not only monetary cost. It's the economic value and it's the social value that Berbicians are now able to access Georgetown. They are able to go to Berbice and come back in the same day. Secondly, the Amalia Falls project, I'm going entirely by what's in the public domain, is for the proposal and what is being sought, somebody to build the project, and they will have a power agreement to sell power at a fixed price. So they have to figure out how to build it. Their cost will be an expense to construct it and deliver power to the government of Ghana at a fixed price. That's what's in the public domain. Similarly, that's the ideas that relate to the gas to shore project. That there has to be, because under our legislation, need to have, only GPL can produce electricity unless you get a license. And the license is granted as it was when immediately in 2020 with some of the private persons to be able to supply electricity and had the capacities. That's what it was done. So it's done by an agreement that fixes the cost. So the person who takes on the burden of it is the person who has to pay for it. Now, we cannot ignore that Guyana is a poor developing country with so many things that it has to provide to its people. and so many things that must be done fairly quickly. To sit and pontificate about things, about what people must do. And I have never said that everybody is silly. I have said that Article 13 does not have the purpose that I believe those who are relying on it wish it did or believe it does. And in relation to the issues with Mr. Greenidge, that's another issue. But we're not talking trade and investment are two different things. I'm talking about WTO and stopping foreign trade products coming into the country is not the same as requiring locals be the principal beneficiaries in the local content legislation. But I won't digress into that. But I will say, this is the reality. Guyana is a poor country that needs to move forward on so many fronts. You can't have everybody sit down and we go to a referendum for every project. Is that the requirement? How would that make sense? How could you govern under those circumstances? And for have the luxury to sit on the sidelines, they don't answer to an electorate.
Gentlemen, we take a short commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue. I know Chris is doing utensils there. When we come back, we will continue the discussion. Great discussion with both of you guys. Dr. Rose will continue the discussion.
Flights to Guyana have never been cheaper. Check out these non-stop direct fares from JFK to Guyana. One way from $150 and round trip from $344. From Guyana to New York, one way from $210 and round trip from $360. These are non-stop direct flights to and from Guyana on American, Caribbean, or JetBlue. These cheap fares will not last, so call Travelspan today. In New York at 718-845-0437. That's 718-845-0437. In Georgetown, call 227-1701. And in Berbice, call 337-4287.
जन्म जन्म का साथ है तुम्हारा हमारा.
Bollywood on the Beach is a family and friends event with Bollywood Entertainment. July 14th to the 18th, enjoy a 5 days and 4 nights all-inclusive vacation with your family and friends and your culture. Performers from India, Pakistan, Trinidad and Guyana will be live at the resorts with your favorite Bollywood songs. In Punta Cana, Dominican Republic, stay in the family section or in the adults-only section and enjoy over 12 restaurants, 11 bars, 7 pools, play areas, spas, and exclusive beach area. Your all-inclusive Bollywood on the Beach vacation is from $1,095 per person, which includes your airfare, transfer, hotel, and all you can eat and drink. Make it a family and friends reunion in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. Flights available from all U.S. cities, Canada, Trinidad, and Guyana. For rates, date, and more info, call Travelspan at 212-243-0865. In Canada, call 647-557-6200. In Trinidad, call Amirals at 645-1604. And in Guyana, 227-1701, or visit us at travelspan.com. Announcing Curry Duck Curry Competition 2022 in Cancun, Mexico.
Hey, y'all take y'all eyes on past week? Last year, y'all take all my cousins to Punta Cana and slaughter them. I drink and sport up. Now y'all want to take another set of us to Cancun? Well, yes. And wait, now y'all taking Raymond Ram Narain, Terry G plus Tassa. Okay, y'all take Raymond, Terry and the Tassa and go along your way.
Bring it down, dee dee down, dee down, ding. Bring it dee down, dee down, ding. Bring it down, dee down, dee down, ding. Hey yo, my sweet son, say I'm addicted to you.
Make it a family and friends reunion. Curry Duck Curry Competition 2022 in Cancun, Mexico on July 28th to August 1st. For more info, call Travelspan at 2122430865. In Canada, call 64755766200. In Trinidad, call Amerals at 6451604. And in Guyana, 2271701, or visit us at travelspan.com.
Are you looking for investment opportunities, or retirement, or even to relocate to Florida? Then Orlando is the place for you. Great deals with spacious land are available. Call Shanisa Jabbar for all your realtor needs at 321-217-1556. That's 321-217-1556. Or email her at shanisajabbar@gmail.com.
Welcome back to Globespan. Welcome to all our listeners, and welcome to our two most dedicated guests, the Honorable Sanjeev Datadin and Mr. Christopher Ram. Now, let me go back to transparency and give you the definition in politics, and I want you all to analyze what I'm saying. In politics, transparency means holding public officials accountable for deceitful or illegal acts, such as corruption, etc. Transparency implies communication and accountability to citizens. It also means that everything the government does, the citizens should be informed of such things. Now, APNU signed the contract and was made to understand 2 years before they made it public. But we all know the reason why they did that. But my question to you, Mr. Christopher Ram, and I think you answered the question partially before. Name me 3 things that this government has not been accountable for or not been transparent for. 3.
Well, if you were to, I mentioned the major projects, and you see, I want you to understand. I come from a commitment to the Constitution, especially Article 13 and Article 149C. We all know that Article 13 was actually elevated. The right under Article 13, that's the right to be consulted on matters affecting the economic, social, and other factors and well-being of people, requires their participation. Now, requiring participation doesn't mean the talking down. It doesn't mean the holding of a half-a-day workshop, for example, and there's not enough information that is provided to allow for meaningful consultation. As Sanjeev knows, that qualification actually is in the Constitution of Guyana. I was told that I would be coming on a program to deal with the petroleum agreement. I think.
Yeah, we coming to that later.
Well, you're taking a long time, but you know, if one were to look at the kind of information that would be useful, and let's face it, the petroleum legislation, not only the PEPA, but the Petroleum Act, vests in the state all the petroleum or hydrocarbon resources of the country. Okay, bye-bye. It's a non-renewable resource. Having taken it out, there's nothing more. So you have not only to take account of the current generation, but future generation. Now, the Natural Resource Fund Act does provide for certain elements of revenues to be put into various forms of savings. But let's get back to the agreement. If you look at the petroleum, it talks, for example.
No, but Chris, if you don't, Chris, can I stop you 1 second? Dr. Rose asked for 3 things that the government did was transparent, in your view.
The 3 things that were transparent.
That were not transparent.
Okay, it was not transparent.
I don't believe, well, I did mention too, we understand that these projects are going ahead. We're still waiting. I've been told that, well, until we sign the agreements. Now, is it that what we're talking about? Is that the kind of consultation we're talking about? If you look at the petroleum agreement, and I'm answering your question, chap. When it talks about associated gas, right? It requires the agreement actually says that the first call on associated gas is that of the contractor. Now, what we have is a situation where it appears that the entire gas project comes mainly under the authority of the government. And perhaps Exxon will build, we don't know. Is Article 12 being complied with? Has there been some side agreement? And, Sanjeev is a specialist in oil and gas. He's a lawyer as well. Has there been some side agreement under which associated and non-associated gas from the wells now come under the purview and control of the government of Guyana? And if so, what is or are, if any, concessions we've had to make, what consideration we have had to give to appropriate the associated or non-associated gas for the use of Guyana? I would like to know that. If we go to the agreement itself, if we go to other sections, and we're talking now about some of the statements, the production statement, the value of production and pricing statement, statement of expenditure and receipt, end of year statement, cost recovery statement, budget statement. None of these things have been made available, as far as I know, to the public at large. Why that is so, I really have no idea. But it would be very instructive in assessing, look, if there is something positive, we must be prepared as professionals to say it's positive. So why withhold this kind of information? I thought as well, budget. When I did a rough examination of the budget, the time for debate. The budget is multiple times bigger than years gone by. And yet, in years gone by, we had far more debate time. That's the kind of discussion in the absence of, say, an independent budget committee. That's the kind of thing you want to have. You want to discuss revenue, you want to discuss loan, you want to discuss who will borrow and how much. You see, when the government acts, and I accept that the government is properly elected. I am not in that school talking about insult, that nonsense about insult. I'll borrow that word from Sanjeev, you don't mind.
Still a free country, Chris. Still a free country.
Okay. Let me just. Let me just say. Go ahead.
Those are very important aspects of a democracy and of our constitution. Our constitution has its flaws, but the Hordmanston reforms, they may not have worked as well as they were intended, but certainly on paper, we need to ensure that the provisions of the Constitution, the provisions of statute, are sufficiently adhered to, and that it's better to err on the side of too much than too little, because you then open yourself to all kinds of questions, and then you have suspicion and all of those things. We don't want that. We want to be able to say, look, we've looked at these things, not some document room 10 years ago on a very flawed contract that has shown some improvement based on what is being said. That's not what I'm talking about. When I talk about the bridge, I was talking about tolls. I wasn't talking about social benefit. And that's the kind of thing that I think would be good for our democracy, would be good for the PPPC, for the entire country. And I'm hoping that we can get to that. We're taking perhaps too long, but let's see where it goes.
Okay.
Dr. Rose,
Sanjeev,
Dr. Rose, let me
Mr.
just-
Datadin, before I bring in on a question, let me say this to all our viewers, that we at Globespan do not attack the government. That's not our intention, or the opposition. We are here to ask the questions. Our guests will answer them, and you be the judge by making your comments on our program. So we're not here to attack. Mr. Datadin, let me ask you this
but
question.
before you go, Dr. Rose, let me just say a couple of things, because this is how things get started, and this is why there are misconceptions. Debate time in Parliament. Since I am a parliamentarian, we have had COVID. There is a meeting between the chief whip on both sides, and they decide how much time is allocated. Now, since I am an MP and been in Parliament, a major concern has been how much time people spend in that chamber, and because of the existence of the pandemic, as a result of which agreements had been made. But I can tell you this, because I have checked, and given the debate, the time allocated in 2018, which was the last year of the APNU AFC did a budget in Parliament, and 2017, which is the second to last year, less spent on the budget debate, and there was no pandemic. So don't say that you limit the time for debate. That in these circumstances, I know I am not on the committee that decides this, but I know that was one of the considerations. The second thing we say, and we got to put this to rest, Dr. Rose. Article 13 of the Constitution is to determine the political system of the country. And it says the principal objective of the political system of the state is to establish an inclusionary democracy by increasing opportunities for participation of citizens and their organization in the management and decision-making process. Inclusionary democracy, you must be allowed to vote. That is what an inclusionary democracy. Increasing opportunities. You have local government elections. You have national elections. You can go to the local democratic council. You can go to your council and make complaints about what you want. These are the systems. The systems have to be available and open to you. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that you have the right to have a view on every governmental decision. It would be preposterous. Cabinet would be 750,000 people. How could that work? You have the right to make direct decision making by going to the various institutions of this. You go to the minister's office, there are various areas. There are specialized areas for complaints like there are specialized areas, obviously, like the courts. There are tribunals for taxes. There are things. This is what Article 13 means. Not that you have a right to have a say on everything. What it gives you the right to do is function in a democratic system where the political system must allow enforcement between the people and the government, the state. This, not only the government, the civil service too. So we need to put that to rest. For very, very long, people are going off with it. And I'm not saying anybody's silly. I'm not saying it's nonsense, Chris. But read what the law is and take it to its logical conclusion. You can't be consulted on everything. I understand why you think you should be. But there is no part of the Constitution that says you should. So don't misrepresent it. On the issues about information in the contract, Dr. Rose, I have been a lawyer for 25 years. My humble view is if you sign a contract, you keep your word, you obey it. Now, we hear from so many people, public persons, including Mr. Ram, that we can exert as a nation and as a people, we can pressure on the operators such as Exxon and whoever else and bring them to the bargaining table to change this agreement. Perhaps they do not understand that changing a contract under duress is an invalid way of changing it. Duress of circumstances on a national project, government has relied on it, will make the contract unenforceable. These are simple, straightforward things. We might have taken the king of undefended divorces against 100 years of legal practice in oil and gas. But that's what we chose. It is unfair, but it's the contract we signed. We have got to be, as a people, grown up enough to know that we signed a contract and we must honor it. That is the reason why local content legislation is important. The tax benefits that are given to Exxon, tier 1 suppliers get that same tax free. And that's why there's a movement to get Guyanese companies, Guyanese citizens up the chain, are those people or they're in partnership so they can benefit, because Guyanese are likely going to keep the money here. They live here, they go to grocery here, they buy, their families reside here. So we have to do what we could do with a contract that is less than what we would have wanted. But we signed it. The people who signed it were a duly elected government. Whether they were foolish or not, that's a judgment elsewhere. The bottom line is the contract is validly signed. Now you say under the contract, want to know what happens with the gas. Now, the gas to shore project is to utilize that gas. You say that the gas goes to, under the contract, it goes to the producers. So therefore, we have an issue. What do the producers do with the gas? Now, doing the gas, with the gas, from public information, was pumping it back into the, which is a common practice. Okay. Well, not a common practice, but a practice.
Mr. Datadin.
So it costs them more. Understand? It costs the operators more to pump it back into the well than to dispose of it.
Okay, so, Mr. Datadin, here is a concession statement question for you. Mm-hmm. Given the narrow victory of the government of the PV party in the last election, do you think it's in its interest to be as transparent as possible to the people?
Absolutely. And I believe they're transparent. Transparency is by giving information, by not doing things in secret. The last time I checked, Dr. Rose, ministers of this government go to every nook and cranny of this country. Every weekend, you could look at Facebook and you could look at Instagram. Well, I'm not on Instagram, so I can't really help you there. But if you look at social media, you will see they are everywhere, meeting communities from diverse things as to the scholarships, the Gold Project, from issues of roads, issues of water, issues of education. It's going, and they meet with over weekend. Yesterday, the vice president was in Linden. He was with the people answering their questions and meeting with them past midnight last night. Meeting he had with him Minister Ashley Singh and Minister Edgell. The people have access to their leaders. That's what brings the transparency. Now, when they're doing projects, and when projects are being done, it is known. It is put in the papers that we're putting out for tenders. We're inviting tenders, they're advertised so that people could come and make their pitch. You know what I mean? You put in your, whatever it is your bid. So it's openly done. I don't understand how you can claim that there's secrecy. I understand what is being complained about by Mr. Ram is the exact details and the reports and the research. But it is not my understanding that is or it's desirable to make that. That should be to the people who are interested in the bid.
Mr. Datadin, I hope that we can answer the question short as much as possible because of time. Mr. Ram, do you think Abdu was accountable during his 5 years in office?
I could answer no.
Mr. Ram? Mr. Ram, you hearing me?
I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say a blank no, but it is our political culture to be as least accountable as possible. That's the reality. I have one question I'd like to put.
Didn't tell anybody for 2 years.
Sanjeev, can I continue, please? I didn't interrupt you. Moderator, can I
continue?
go
ahead.
Sorry.
I'd like to put one question to my friend Sanjeev. When the PPP put in its manifesto that it was going to renegotiate the contract, did he tell them as a candidate on the list that, look, you cannot do that? That's a simple question.
Renegotiating the contract is a consensual process. And if the other party has been renegotiating the contract, there can be no negotiation. It's a consensual process. It's not a process brought about by duress or pressure. Duress and pressure, duress, unfair dealings, governmental advantage are all reasons why contracts are set aside across the Commonwealth. How could a government engage in such tactics or subscribe to that and then hold them up as being a lawful democratic government? You can't do that. You can't use those.
I asked for one word answer. I'm getting one paragraph.
My answer is very simple. What was said is we would renegotiate. Renegotiation is a consensual process. If the other side refuses to renegotiate, there is nothing. You can't unilaterally.
And Sanjeev, that's the problem. Has the government asked Exxon for renegotiation?
Well, you got to ask those that are in government.
Well, you are part of the government, Mr. Datadin.
No, I'm part of the legislature. I'm not part. There's a distinction.
In your knowledge base and your circle of influence, was there any word that you have heard that the government had asked Exxon that the contract stipulates that there can be renegotiation, and as you said, if both parties agree? So the government of Guyana most likely agreed. Have they asked the Exxon for renegotiation, and Exxon says no?
Firstly, every contract can be renegotiated by consent of the parties to the contract. That is one. Two, I have no first-hand knowledge of what exchanges go into Exxon. Anything I say would be hearsay, and I don't want to do that. But there are people who you can minister. There's a president. There's an attorney general. These are all people that do that question is best suited to. But understand this, as a matter of law, unless all the parties agree, there can be no renegotiation.
Go ahead, Charles.
Okay. Mr. Datadin, over the years, I'm sure you also, when the PP went into office, as Mr. Ram rightly mentioned, the president campaigning said that renegotiation is on the table. So let's talk about that. Secondly, when the government went into office, they said there is sanctity of contract, that you cannot now renegotiate a contract because of sanctity of contract. Next thing we are told now is that there's some clauses there. What clause they call it, Mr. Datadin? The stability clause that now restrict them from negotiating. What really is, I mean, and as you already said, you're not part of the government, you're part of the legislature.
No, but
what really the government...
Very easily, Chair. I can explain those to you very easily.
Okay.
The stability clause in a contract survives a contract, meaning even when the contract ends or you think it ends, stability clause remains valid and enforceable. A stability clause in a PSA started in Indonesia in the 1960s. It has been discontinued largely, not used in PSAs or production sharing agreements or production sharing contracts, whichever you choose. It's not been used because this is what it provides for. It says that no matter what happens after the initial contract is executed, no economic disadvantage will be suffered by the original operators, in this case, Exxon, Hess. So if Guyana were to renegotiate the contract to a different position and they were to make 5% instead of 50%, the government would have to make good under the stability clause whatever economic loss they suffered, which is the other 45%. So firstly, the government did say, it was said in the election that they would attempt it. Secondly, renegotiations are consensual. They didn't abandon it. Thirdly, what is the value of renegotiation with a stability clause? If we change the constitution, Charles, and Exxon makes less money, the government has to compensate for that less money. So essentially, if Exxon was going to make 20, Exxon will make $20 a barrel forever. Even if we change the laws and we introduce taxes and they only make 10, the government has to pay them the other 10. Now, a stability clause is a very, very unique clause. There are books written about it. It's been litigated up and down the Commonwealth and everywhere else. It is well known. It is not included in contracts of recent vintage. Guyana was different. The undefended divorces negotiating. So what happened? We signed the contract with it. Now, what is the value, Charles? If you and I make a contract that says I must pay you $10 a month, no matter what, and I renegotiate the contract that under the terms of the contract, you will earn $5. Don't I have to pay you the other $5 anyway? What
Sanjeev,
is the value?
I know we're getting into I don't want to use the word semantics, but this is no, I know you're an attorney and you know exactly what you're saying. What I'm saying is this.
Stability clause,
the PPP,
you or your views could look up the stability
right.
clause. It maintains the position between the parties at the time they sign the contract, no matter what happens in the. So they have
but
the advantage.
Mr. Datadin, Mr. Datadin, as an attorney at law for 25 years, the Attorney General, the President, the Vice President, they all said publicly that this has been the worst contract ever recorded in history. to any country in the world. They didn't say that part, but I'm putting that part in. If that is so, was that?
I did.
You did as well? Okay, look at that. So when a court of law overturn a contract like that, regardless of what the clause says, knowing that this is the worst and secondly, before you answer the question, secondly, shouldn't there be a commission of inquiry to investigate why Raphael Trotman signed that contract that is such a bad contract?
On your issue of commission of inquiry, you're mixing us up. We're not the ones that hold them for text messages. All right. Commission of inquiry is not something that this government does a lot of. But I will say this to you, honestly. It is not a great contract, Charles. I think that is a consensus position. But a government, a duly elected government, and ministers who are trained lawyers with advisors from all over the world decided this was the agreement to sign. Now, agreement is not inherently, if you want, for want of a better word, is not inherently that. It's just an agreement that gives a lot of advantages to the operator and not so many to the state. But you see, the undercurrent of that agreement, Charles, is this. All of it has to be done by the operators first. So although we will say that Guyana made, as of December, $600 million, Guyana didn't spend $1 on the investment into putting it in. Whatever money was spent on all the drilling, all the work, the building, the PSOs, everything was paid for by Exxon.
Mr. Datadin, with due respect, Mr. Datadin.
That's why people think, and Exxon firstly is a business organization company. They're one of the largest in the world. They were here to do business. Now the contract that is thing, do I think it's a contract that is fair? I'm not of that view. But was it deception? Was it cheating to do it? I don't think so. I think we did not know what we did not know. Those who represent that is. And as a result, they made an agreement that is not to our benefit in many regards. But there's no, I said earlier about the thing, but there's no undercurrent of deception, of cheating, of fooling people. There's not that. So that's why the contract is enforceable. You
okay.
See, it wasn't trickery. It was that they did not know. They made poor decisions.
Sometimes I'm bothering a lot of questions asked Mr. Datadin. Why is the PP so much defending this contract now when in fact in opposition they were not so outspoken as okay.
No, Charles, it's not defending the contract, Charles. It's saying we've signed a contract. We can't have a reputation as a nation that we sign a contract and after someone has spent $9 or $8, $10 billion, we want a different deal. How could that be right? If it were you, Charles.
Mr. Datadin, recently Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Datadin, Trinidad and Tobago renegotiated a contract with their foreign partners successfully, even though they had already spent billions as well. Suriname, Mr. Datadin, Suriname didn't spend a dime either on their oil resource, but they're getting far more than we are getting. They're getting 6% royalty. They're getting tax on their profit and so on, and they did not spend a dime.
Yeah,
so for the government to use that argument that we didn't spend no money, but we are getting, it's our resource.
Yeah, but stick a pin, Charles. Suriname had a better contract to start with. They didn't renegotiate. They had a better one to start with. Secondly, Trinidad were able to renegotiate because those foreign partners wanted more acreage. So there was something that they came for. They wanted more already had. So you have something to go at. That does not, neither of those things exist here. Suriname did not sign an agreement like we did. They signed a better agreement. And I should say, in my opinion, I think they have a better agreement.
Can the government of Guyana, Mr. Datadin, can the government of Guyana tell the other partners, we will not give approval for any other well, and that's it. We will shut off any more exploration. Can the government do that?
So I make a contract with you to rent my house, and I'm not happy. So I decide that you get no water and electricity.
No. What the discovery so far, they have about 12 billion barrels of oil. I'm saying that will more than compensate them for the cost. Can the government, I'm not saying that it can happen, but I'm saying, can the government make a decision? Listen, we will not give any more permission for any more drilling of wells. Can that happen?
Let's hear Mr. Ram view of this. Let's hear Mr. Ram.
In simple terms, the government can't frustrate the contract by a deliberator. So if it is that this is what is being contemplated, is saying, as it was well discussed with the Payara one, to say that with the Payara project, we're going to give no permission unless you do. If you choose to give permission, under the existing terms. If you choose not to give permission, then production starts. But you can't choose to change contract conditional upon your permission. It would be unlawful. That would be the duress, the government using their might, using their influence. That would be all. Charles,
Sanjeev, the oil explorator have it on duress. Let's hear Mr. Ram comment.
Let's hear Mr. Ram views on this.
I want to say this one thing. Charles, regardless of what people of Guyanese were always seen to be decent people. We are decent people. We signed a contract. We cannot, because we don't like the result, just take it away and make it advantageous to the other side. We signed a contract, man. We have to keep our word.
Mr. Datadin, and I agree with you, except to tell you before Mr. Ram answer, the contract says that the contract can be renegotiated if both parties agree. I'm asking again, did the government ask Exxon for renegotiation? And you don't know the answer to that question?
Let Mr. Ram come.
Let Mr. Ram.
Mr. Ram come.
Mr. Ram?
Mr. Ram?
Well, I was wondering whether I was still part of this discussion.
Well, you are busy doing so many things.
No, hold on.
Charles, no, let him in.
Here. It's one of the tragedies of Guyana that we change our position on fundamental national issues based on where we stand politically. I'm sorry to say this, but Mr. Datadin is a good case in point. Now, the words, this question of sanctity of contract, we know where the word sanctity comes from, what the adjective is, right? He talks about fair and we sign it. So does Mr. Datadin honestly believe that if a contract has illegal clauses, either in part or fundamentally, it is sacred? I would be amazed to think that anyone, let alone someone of Mr. Datadin's stature, would say that. It's a tragedy too, that what is happening now is the government is siding with the oil companies. Lots of the things that Mr. Datadin is saying this evening could be used by the very people who are exploiting us. I think Mr. Datadin knows this. Mr. Datadin must know the case in Israel, Movement for Good Government. That case ruled a 10-year stability clause to be unlawful. And let me tell you, you know who appeared in the case to argue for the government and argue for the contract, no less a person than Benjamin Netanyahu. When Netanyahu appeared, he made the case on security. And you know what the court said to him? They said, Mr. Prime Minister, we will not dare to encroach on your right to determine what is the security interests of Israel. But what we as a court will do is tell you when you are doing something that is illegal. You are, what Mr. Datadin has just said and what the contract does, it strangles our parliament for a minimum of 40 years. It cannot, no matter how the national interest requires it. Our parliament, which is free to make any law for the peace, order, and good government of the country, our parliament cannot any longer do so because of that stability clause. We have had this discussion. We've had matters against the contract and its operations, and there's no question that issues where people act ultra vires, whether they act illegally or improperly, there is a case for judicial review. This contract cannot take, it simply cannot take precedence over the Constitution of Guyana. Now, I am not going to be as profound. Mr. Datadin has all the experience. I am not saying that that contracts must not be observed, but if a contract has elements of it which are illegal, unlawful, or ultra vires, if the minister has granted concessions which he ought not to have granted, there's nothing sacred about that. It is illegal. And any court properly constituted will say, no, we are going too far. It will not question. In fact, Section 10 of the Petroleum Exploration and Production Agreement expressly authorizes the minister to enter into petroleum agreements with any person. It particularly says not inconsistent with the law. I'm sure Mr. Datadin knows that those words, they're in parentheses, but they are expressly stated in the contract. So
Charles,
it's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that what we are in fact doing is giving
but Chris,
Exxon. Let me finish.
Just one
let
issue.
Me, let me finish. Sure.
I just wanted to tell you this. The Israeli court, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm familiar with the decision. The Israeli court was not considering a stability clause in a contract because the contract did not. The Israeli court was judging whether Benjamin Netanyahu, when he presented the gas plan, gave an undertaking that his government or no future government for 10 years would legislate in the parliament. And that was referred to as a stability clause. There was no written stability clause in the contract. What Netanyahu was doing was making a promise that they would not, they had reached negotiations, and it was a governmental promise. And the government had no right to find another government. Totally different. And if you want the amount of decisions that have upheld security clauses, I'd be happy to send them. But the Israeli case that you and others have been using, Mr. Ram, did not a stability clause in the contract. It was a governmental promise. That's what it was. The court said the prime minister had no power to do that. Totally different from what we have here. So
you don't need to shout. You asked me, you interrupted me for a minute. Now you go on and on.
I was interrupting you because what you're saying of the decision is factually incorrect. It's not. It was the Leviathan field, and the field was. It was a gas plant provided by Yahoo when he went to the Knesset, and they said you couldn't do that.
Okay, Mr.
Okay, Sanjeev, can Chris continue?
But I am telling you what the court decided. Look, this is, and you know, the best thing, and I hope people like Mr. Datadin would be willing. Let's test this agreement. Does it override the Constitution? Is as simple as that. All I'm saying, but don't misunderstand me. What I said. There is a case going through the courts now. And what Mr. Datadin is doing is just feeding the oil companies with legal points that they could say, look, your own member of parliament have said this. Now, I know you're going to say, well, you know, I got no weight. But why are we publicly advising? Why don't we think of our national interest? Why are we muzzling our parliament for not 10 years?
We don't muzzle the parliament, Chris.
But Chris, Sanjeev, one question.
What did you say? No, let me hear you what you said just now.
There is no muzzle on parliament. Parliament can pass the law. Chris, the decision is...
Can I continue? Can I continue?
Yeah,
continue, Chris. Yeah.
Can I continue?
They
can pass the law, but the effect of any law...
All right, guys, can one speak? Sanjeev? Continue, Sanjeev. Chris will continue.
The movement of quality government Israel versus the Prime Minister. It's a judgment on the 27th of March 2016, CJ 4374 of 2015. And the decision is clear. There was no stability clause in the contract. What happened was that the Prime Minister took a gas plant.
Okay, you made that point already, Sanjeev. You made that point. Sanjeev, you made that point already.
In our situation, it is unhelpful. It's not applicable.
Okay, Mr. Ram. So, Mr. Ram, you said you want to continue. Let's hear what you have to say.
Well, the effect, and I try, out of respect for people, I don't usually interrupt them. The effect is to say that Parliament is not muzzled. When once you pass a law, if Parliament were to pass a law that in any way had any impact on, not me talking about, I talking generally, then the Parliament itself will have to appropriate funds to compensate for that passing of the law. The effect is the same. Now, can we, under our Parliament may make law for the peace, order, and good government of Guyana, can we say a stability clause for 40 years is a reasonable proposition in relation to our stability clause, which seeks to allow an exclusion by saying, oh, you can do it, but if you do it, you must compensate us. The economic impact is absolutely the same. That's my point.
And before you go on, Chris and Sanjeev, isn't oral agreement and written agreement have almost the same weight in a court of law?
In most circumstances, yes.
Right. So if, as you said, Netanyahu was making an oral agreement, that is the same thing as the written agreement, wasn't it?
Or what happened is Netanyahu reported to the Knesset, the parliament in Israel, that a gas plan had been concluded with whoever was the... And in that plan, what was agreed from the negotiation with them was that there would be no Parliament would for 10 years not pass any laws to interrupt them. And even if the government changed, that was going to be the position.
But that's the point, Sanjeev. Sanjeev, sorry, I know we're out of time, but that's the point. Netanyahu was struck down for 10 years, and Chris is saying this agreement we have is 40 years. So wouldn't the court strike that down for unreasonableness?
No. This is a gas plan, which they came up with. We signed a contract, and our contract has a specific clause that will survive the contract. We can't have the expenditure. It's not a stopple. That's what's the problem. The expenditure has already taken place. We can't.
Okay, all right, let's go to another question, Sanjeev. Do you, in your view, do you think the government should defend this contract against the oil companies?
I don't understand what you mean by defend the contract.
There's a case going on right now in the courts of Guyana. Should the government send legal representation to defend that contract?
The Attorney General is sued, as far as I understand, yes. How could you be sued and you don't turn up to appear in court?
Well, we have seen that with many cases. You don't turn up, and the court make a decision. You don't necessarily have to turn up.
No. The government can't do that. An
Why not?
individual could choose. The government must go forward and say what its position is. You could go forward and say whatever your position, but the government can't be absent, and that's not right.
Chris, what do you have to say?
No, I think Sanjeev is correct. The government. What would be interesting to see is how strenuously, you know what seems to me, and I believe somebody has made this point, is now Exxon and the government of Guyana versus the people of Guyana. Just the optics of that seem so unpalatable. That particularly when there are issues of illegality that are pointed out, inconsistencies, and ultra-virus acts. Can't the government, big and broad-minded enough to say, look, on this point, we concede? Can't they do that? Do you have to fight everything by the most creative set of logic or illogic?
Sanjeev, in closing now, Sanjeev, you can answer that in closing because we're wrapping up now. So can you answer that in closing and give your final statement?
Mr. Ram should actually go forward and argue this case. I involved in it or not involved in it, I can tell you this. What is perceived to be subject of and what is perceived to be things that are excesses have to be put in context of the contract itself and whether A, they are in fact illegal, and two, whether or not they can be severed and the contract remain as they are. To be the issues. But you got to understand this. Who signed the contract? I understand there are issues raised about the size of the acreages. And I'm interested to know where our legislation is as it relates to a production agreement or exploration agreement, and whether or not we think that exploration and production are the same things. Acreages identified in exploration, the limitation applies to production too. These are all going to be very interesting arguments. My suggestion is that we have to wait and see, but I think English is plain enough, and most people understand the distinction between various stages. So
let's assume that the contract is never changed, Mr. Datadin. What do you foresee being the future revenue that the oil sector will bring into Guyana if nothing is changed in the contract?
I know there are three entities that I look at in terms of projections. I don't want to call names because I don't want to tongue. One is a German outfit, one is a Scandinavian outfit, and one is a British have a particular affinity to. They all range in terms of revenue on what is already proven fields, and they range into the hundred of millions, even billion. There are also projections that are made for how many more are we likely to find. There is a view, I don't know, this is public information too that you see, that there's a view that across a particular SWAT that links Venezuela to that goes across Guyana, there's a belief that that's where the vein, if you want to put it that, to use a gold term, is. And they expect more discoveries along that path. If that is indeed the position, then it will go from low tens, from in billions to very including hundreds. But that is, of course, oil price. How long is oil going to remain relevant? Which is why my personal view again is that we should take as much oil as we can out of the ground as fast as we can.
Okay, thank you, Sanjeev. Chris, anything in closing?
Well, you did ask about the revenue. There are three principal functions, Charles. One is the cost of production. Up to now, no one, not even the government, after 2 full years of oil production, has deigned to tell us as a people. Then there is price. Now, 3 months ago, if you were to say that oil price would exceed $100, people would tell you you're a madman or a madwoman. Here it is. That's the reality. Another important one is allowing exploration costs to be set off against production revenue. That can be very, very fundamental. No wonder you had a situation where Hess is making a profit. Hess has 30% in the 2016 agreement. CNOOC Nexen is making a profit, but Esso is making a whopping loss. Those are some of the considerations you have to take into account. So, as I said, there are functions of some things about the future. Some we can control. I have written that as far as the absence of ring fencing is concerned, all you need to do is when there's an application for either license, a production or an exploration license, prospecting license, you say that one, you may not commingle costs. That's all you have to do. I am not aware, in respect of any agreement, any license, production, or prospecting, that the government has taken note of that, which is why I had written why ring fencing matters and why it does not matter, because the minister is free under the act to grant a license subject to such terms and conditions as he considers appropriate. So to answer your question, it's anybody's guess at the moment. We don't know where things are going to be. With this situation, we saw that lending for oil and gas projects or non-renewable will have consequences. Mean financing costs can go up. We don't know how quickly that will kick in, given what is now taking place in Ukraine and all kinds of different things. What we need is a good, informed discussion, not clouded by where we stand politically, or whether we like a government or not government, whether we think Trotman didn't know what he didn't know. But none of us don't know. I don't know. So it's interesting. We will have to see how matters turn out, and we will all look on at it with interest. But I want to thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for bringing this discussion around this stability clause, because I believe it has fundamental consequences for us, in addition to all the other details regarding these giveaways that Trotman granted and that are now being stoutly defended by persons who once attacked them all. Thank you and good night.
All right. Dr. Rose, anything in closing?
Yes, finally, I will say that the government should increase the retirement age from 55 to 62 years old.
I agree.
Pressure the internet providers to provide better Wi-Fi services to the people. And 3, increase the salaries of teachers, nurses, and police officers to let's start the salary $125,000 a month.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rose. And thank you, Sanjeev, Datadin, for taking the time to be with us. Mr. Ram, thank you for being with us. And to our audience out there, we want to thank you for staying on. Very, very healthy conversation. I hope you guys learned a little more.
Very spiritual discussion.